If there's one thing I think most gamers can relate to, it's that they've all had a game they didn't like when they first played it, but eventually came around to liking it later on. And if you haven't, well, then maybe you're just really impatient. But it's not always just about being patient. Sometimes it just comes down to knowing how to approach a game the right way. In fact, there's a number of reasons why somebody will give up on a game, and I'd like to go through those. These categories aren't strictly tied to specific games, and a lot of these will bleed into each other a little bit, as well as come down to the specific person playing them. There's certainly games we've given up on and have no regrets about doing so, but today we're talking about games we didn't like initially, but did end up liking in the end. Okay, so the first reason is pretty straightforward, and that would be just the general difficulty of a game. This means you understand what you're supposed to do, you've seen the way people who are really good at the game play it, but you just cannot seem to progress through the game. You can't do it, and the practice required isn't worth it to you. Now believe me, I've seen this a lot. People are usually pretty angry when they make this determination, all huffy and puffy, and really talk themselves up on why they're justified in not liking it. But time and again, sure enough, that curiosity lingers in the back of their mind, and eventually they come back to it and put in the time to practice and get better at it, feeling very satisfied with themselves once they're finally able to progress. By the way, I'll be showing some of the personal examples that have been the case for me, but feel free to think of games that fit into these various categories based on your personal gaming experiences. Alright, so the next category has to do with learning the controls to play a game. This can happen a number of ways, but it comes down to having trouble getting your character, or whatever it is you're controlling, to do what you want it to do. This could just be because the game straight up has bad controls, although that's often debatable. For example, a lot of people will tell you that the original Resident Evil games had poor controls, while some will argue they're intentionally a little tricky, and that's just how the game was designed. Another factor for less experienced gamers could just be using the controller. I've certainly seen people who had a tough time transitioning from more old school controllers to more modern controllers that have way more buttons as well as 2 analog sticks. That's quite a change for some, as much as it might seem very basic for some of us more experienced gamers. Beyond controls, I want to look at the next type of challenge that makes gamers give up on a game. This is something I've referred to before in an older video of mine as where the hell do I go, or what the hell do I do difficulty. Generally, this comes from games that have some sort of initial learning curve as far as how the game works. For example, let's take ActRaiser. The game is divided into 2 sections. The side-scrolling stages are simple enough, but when you get to these parts, gamers are often lost. Like, now I'm a little naked angel guy flying over a town? What is the objective now? So often gamers will get to a point like this and just dismiss the game as nonsensical. But once again, that curiosity lingers in the back of their mind, and they eventually come back to figure it out, perhaps after doing some research online. As far as where do I go difficulty, this is one I feel like people have to make a decision early on whether they want to use a guide or not. Odds are, if you struggle figuring out where to go early on in the game, you're going to repeatedly run into trouble. Sure, these games can give hints on where to go and even funnel you in the right direction at points, but with so many various paths to take, often gamers just never get the hang of how to navigate their way through without any help. The last category I'd like to talk about is what I describe as learning what approach to take. This is slightly different than straight up difficulty, and actually a lot of people would just say this applies to any game that's difficult. Let me try to explain what I mean by just using an example. Ghouls and Ghosts. Super Ghouls and Ghosts, that is. While this game is very difficult and how you control your character is fairly straightforward, a lot of gamers don't play this game the right way. They often either charge ahead guns blazing, even though Arthur doesn't have a gun, but you know what I mean. Or they try to move through slowly, trying to kill everything on screen before advancing. Well, I've found that with this game, it's more about knowing when to stop and be more patient, combined with the moments of just quickly moving your butt along to get through certain parts. The game is still very challenging even with that in mind, but you can't really get anywhere in the game or experience much enjoyment until you at least figure that part out. Whatever the reason is, there are awesome video game experiences out there that we may just need a little bit of extra patience in order to enjoy. How much time and effort you invest before giving up on a game can be tricky though. I mean, we only have so much time and there are more games out there than we could ever play. Alright, for this week's question, I thought it would be fun to ask which games you've actually given up on, as well as which games you've come around to loving after not liking much initially. So leave those comments down below, and I will see ya in the next video.